Welcome to the How to Grow Your Food Processing Business Beyond Manitoba's Borders webinar series, How to Develop a Pricing and Promotional Strategy to Drive Your Sales Velocity on Retail Store Shelves webinar that is hosted in partnership with Manitoba Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada. Today's webinar will outline the incremental costs you may incur when expanding your sales into other provinces, guidance on how to determine your selling price to maintain your profitability, and to discuss how to develop a pricing and promotional strategy to drive your sales velocity at retail stores. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Kathy Sawchak, and I'm a business development specialist with the Manitoba Agriculture Value Added Branch. I would like to start this webinar today with a land acknowledgement. We recognize that Manitoba is on treaty territories and ancestral lands of the Anishinaabe, Nishnawak, Dakota Oiat, the Nissalin, and the Hethawak peoples. We acknowledge Manitoba is located on the homeland of the Red River Métis, and we acknowledge northern Manitoba includes lands that were and are the ancestral lands of the Inuit. We respect the spirit and intent of treaties and treaty making and remain committed to working in partnership with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people in the spirit of truth, reconciliation, and collaboration. Before we get started, we'll go over a couple of housekeeping items. Everyone's mic has been muted and camera turned off to minimize presentation interruptions. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, please enter them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen, and I'll make sure that they are addressed by the speaker after the presentation. And this webinar will be recorded and will be sent out to all registrants next week, along with a brief survey requesting your feedback on the webinar. So let's get started. It is my pleasure to introduce you to Jeff Fiddick, who is a business development specialist that has worked with Manitoba Agriculture for 14 years. Jeff is a sales and marketing professional with over 20 years of progressive consumer packaged goods marketing experience spanning the grocery, food service, home decor, and manual cleaning tools industries. Positions held include Director of Marketing, National Sales Representative and Marketing Analyst, Sales Agent, and Category Manager. Jeff has a Bachelor of Commerce degree with majors in marketing and general business from the University of Saskatchewan in Saskatoon. Jeff has over 12 years of experience with the food industry that includes expertise accelerating revenue growth, market share, the management of products and product categories, pricing, promotion, margins, and retail merchandising for maximizing productivity. Jeff's experience also includes the management and supervision of multi-unit in-store bakery and retail grocery operations, as well as direct business-to-business sales experience selling to food service and institutional food customers. Jeff, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kathy. Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to explore the question of pricing and promotional strategy to drive sales in interprovincial markets. In terms of scope of today's presentation, our target audience is food and beverage processors who have successfully saturated or near saturated the Manitoba market and are ready to expand within Canada. Food and beverage processors who have already started selling interprovincially and want to explore areas for improvement before expanding further. And most of our clients sell to grocery, so today's content will focus on expansion from a grocery perspective. As responsible marketers, of course, the first thing we always do in assessing an opportunity is to look at the market. This time, we're going to focus on the number of corporate retailers in the large cities in each Western Canadian province. We can exploit our existing relationships with these retailers from our successes in our home market. So just looking across the table here, we've got our home market of Winnipeg, we've got Regina, Saskatoon, Calgary, Edmonton, and Vancouver. Of course, these retailers, Sobeys, Safeway, Save One, RCSS, Real Canadian Superstore, have stores in other markets. Between Edmonton and Calgary, there's Red Deer. There's going to be other markets. We're just kind of focusing on the top ones just to maximize the productivity of our activities. If we just focus in on Sobeys and Safeway in our home market, store-wise, they represent about 64% of the corporate stores in the Winnipeg market. Regina and Saskatoon, a little over half at 54%, Calgary almost 60%, Edmonton almost 50%, and Vancouver about a third of the stores in that market. Whenever I'm speaking of Vancouver, I mean the greater Vancouver area. So there's other places within that it's just easier to say Vancouver. terms of priority, of course, Winnipeg is our first priority. That's we've hopefully done a decent job of penetrating Winnipeg and building relationships here. I've got the big thumbs for Calgary and Edmonton. I think those are the ones with the greatest potential, just because the store count, um, and in terms of the pricing opportunity relative to our costs. Vancouver, I think, is also up there as another priority market. I put LP for lower priority with Saskatoon and Regina, just for the reason that the store count is low, populations are much lower, population density of these markets is going to be lower. And in terms of logistics costs, there's incremental costs for dropping goods along the way. So if we were to ship goods from Winnipeg to Calgary and do a drop in Regina, let's say, there might be a substantial cost for that. Plus, we're storing goods there, and then there's the whole question of serving those markets afterwards. And with those low store counts, it's not necessarily a lot of work to be done in those markets. Okay. Another thing we can look at is the retail pricing for a bundle of groceries in each of these markets. I don't know why, but I like to build my charts from the bottom here. So we've got Manitoba at the bottom of the chart, where a typical bundle of grocery items there, let's say, costs average of $75. So we've got that at the 100% point. We're going to make everything else relative to Manitoba. Saskatchewan's actually slightly cheaper, $70 a basket, so 93% of Manitoba. Alberta, a little more expensive, so they're 7% higher on average than Manitoba. And British Columbia is 117% on average than Manitoba. Now, expanding this across, again, working from the bottom to the top, if we had an item, I'm just going to look over here just to highlight this. If we had an item that sold at retail for $3.99, we would sell it to the retailer for $2.79. They would make their 30% gross margin, and that would be great. If we were to sell into the Alberta market and using the formula to say, well, if we were to inflate our retail by 7%, we would land at a retail of $4.25. So we'd sell it to them, to Albertans at Alberta retailers at $2.98, and it would retail at $4.25. Now, no one sells anything for $4.25, so they would round it up to $4.29. Similarly, in British Columbia, the average pricing there is 17% higher than Winnipeg. So that means the retail would calculate out at $4.65. Again, that's a weird number, so it would round up to $4.69. And we would be able to sell it to, based on that, we would sell it to the retailers in British Columbia for $3.26. Now, that's just kind of a starting point, because ultimately we want to get in those markets, see if there's any comp items to ours, where their retail is at, where we want to position ourselves relative to those competitive items. But this is always a good starting point. What's also nice about this is that these higher retails in these markets gives us some room to pay for the shipping expense of getting our goods across the country over to these stores. I don't know if you've heard this or not, but I have, and it's that supply chain management is ultimately one giant math problem. And the reason for that is because supply chain people are constantly doing lots of testing. They're always testing alternative scenarios for transport, storage, distribution. Also consider alternatives with the product itself. It might be the pack or the size of the product, the packaging type, whether you can get away with a slightly thinner corrugate box, let's say, or even palletizing in terms of the tire or the tier. Maybe you can make the box slightly smaller and save some headspace and save some corrugate. They might be looking at ingredient sources, like alternative places to buy the raw materials. So they're constantly testing alternative hypotheses of how things could be improved. And with that, you get lots of spreadsheets and lots of different math scenarios. So just looking at this graph here, again, I built this one from the bottom to the top. My logic is that we start at the bottom with us. This is our factory here. And let's say our cost of goods is $1. We've got the unit pricing here and the case pricing here, assuming 24 units in a case. So in every chart you ever get from me, there'll be bright yellow boxes. That's where you would enter your information. Everything else is going to be calculated for you. So here, let's say I always recommend you want to start with at least a 45% gross profit right off the hop. So you put in your 45%, you get a net price. You might have plugged in some other numbers here for some other stuff we want to kind of add in for safety. And typically for our goods, retailers seem to be happy with the 30% gross margin. I've always worked on 35 because when I've asked retailers, they usually told me 35, but I've consistently seen where the retailers nowadays are only taking 30% on goods that are sold by local vendors. So what this means is we got three numbers that are important. Excuse me. We've got our cost of goods, which is $1. We got our retailer landed cost, which is what we would sell it to the retailer at. And then we've got the final retail that the consumers pay of $3.99. Now, one thing we'll consistently use these numbers because it's nice and easy to scale. So for instance, if your situation is that your cost of goods is, let's say, $1.75, well, you can just multiply these all out by 1.75 and it'll tell you what the other results should be. Typically, we're looking for a 1-to-4 ratio, cost of goods relative to final retail. Ultimately, from that point to the retail, it's a 75% gross margin. Sounds like a lot, but when you put in the retailer's share, if there's distribution in there, if there's inside monies, if there's a sales commission, et cetera, all those things have to come off that. So we want to build that in. We want to be proactive and build this in. So if we look at the status quo, hopefully the status quo for you, again, looking from the bottom. So we're basically saying for every $1 of cost of goods, we're going to sell it for $3.99. So our status quo is we've got our 45% margin. I put in 5% sales commission. That's standard in our industry. I put in 13.6 inside monies. That's about normal for the retailers, Safeway, Sobeys, Save-On, and Co-op. That's about what they're looking for that. We're not paying any outbound freight right now because we're just talking about our local market. DSD, which is direct store delivery. So we're doing the deliveries in this market ourselves. So we're not engaging with the wholesaler. And as I mentioned, the Safeway, the Sobeys, they're happy to make 30% on our product. So we can sell it to them at $2.79 and they're going to sell it for $3.99. Note that I've put the inside monies are over in O&A, which is over and above funds, different names for these things. This isn't going to be spent at this point, but it's still nice to have it. There's a placeholder because basically what it does is it gives us 38 cents a unit or $9.11 per case to use in our marketing. So that's excellent to have that because then we can use it for demos. We can use it for price reductions. We've got that funding there. Same with the sales agent or commission. We've got an extra 14 cents a unit or $3.35 per case of 24. Again, that's not going to be spent at this point because chances are you or someone close to you is going to be your sales agent and perhaps they're not being compensated in this fashion at this time. Now, if we were to look at the same scenario, our local market, but now let's say that we've engaged with a local distributor. So someone like a DeLuca's or a Worldwise Foods, pretty much the exact same scenario here, except that now we've put in a wholesale upcharge. So typically 25%. Everything else here in every other profit and loss statement or P&L, you'll see every number is based on the top line and everything is based on a gross margin calculation with the higher number subtracting the lower number and dividing by the higher number. So 30% is a gross margin as a function of $3.99. So if you took $3.99 times 30%, you get $1.20. One exception to that is when we're talking about a wholesale upcharge. Upcharge meaning that you're taking the cost. So we would, in this instance, we would be selling our product to the wholesaler for $2.23 per unit or $53.61 a case. They're going to add 25% to it. So it's going to be $2.23 plus 25% is 56 cents or $13.40 a case. And they're going to sell it for the same price that we were selling it to the retailer. So now the retailer should be paying the exact same price, just that they're not going to be paying it to you. They're now going to be paying it to your wholesale agent. Again, outbound freight, there'll probably be some small charge here, not a lot. Your inside money's still not used. Commission probably still not being used. Now, one thing is in terms of putting actually, I'll mention that next. I'll move on to here. Now, let's look at shipping outside Manitoba. Huge shopping list of things here. We'll just quickly run through this. This is essentially just to create some assumptions about what we're dealing with so we can arrive at some sort of realistic numbers so that we have something to work with for an example. So let's take the individual product weight. Let's say we're selling specialty jam. There's 300 grams of jam in each container. The container weighs 150 grams. Total weight of that product is 450 grams. Let's say we're putting 24 in a case, multiply it out, you get 10,800 grams. Divide by 1,000 is 10.8 kilograms. So let's say we've got a corrugate box we're putting it into. That's half a kilogram. Total weight per case then is the sum of those two, 11.3 kilograms. We worked it out in terms of how to stack them on a pallet, found that we can fit 16 cases per pallet per layer. The total weight of the layer of product is 180.8 kilograms. Based on the height requirements, I've seen some different numbers on this, but this is a pretty high density product. So I set the maximum height at 53. With lighter product, you can go probably about 72 inches, including the height of the pallet, because this is a higher density product. I went 53 inches, so works out for the math that you can get 6.625 layers per pallet. Obviously but the 0.625 isn't realistic, so we stripped that off, round it down to 6. So you multiply it out. Now we've got 1,084.8 kilograms of product. The pallet weighs 22.73 kilograms. Total weight of that is 1,107.5. Total weight of the product and pallet. And we've got 96 cases on there. We've got total, so 24 units per case. We've got 3,072 units per pallet. I like to work things out in a per unit basis because then I can see on the ECHI what it means. Now back to our formula. So if our cost of goods was $1, that pallet of goods, excluding the portion of corrugate is going to be into your cost of goods. So it would be $3,072 cost for this. If your COGS, let's say, was double that, then the cost of this pallet would be $6,144. So a bit of an investment there. Now, let's say we're going to ship to Calgary and Edmonton, because I was all excited about those when we started. So let's say we ship the one pallet to, no, actually, we're going to do 2 pallets. I'm sorry, 2 pallets to each location. So it is, and the reason for that is, let's say we've got 2 SKUs or stock keeping units. And so 2 pallets of that would be 2,437 kilograms per location, a total of 5,361 kilograms. Just looking up some rates, all in, it's pretty much about $1,950 per location to get it from Winnipeg to Calgary and a separate truck from Winnipeg to Edmonton. So this is LTL or less than truckload shipping. I also tried the scenario of saying, well, let's go from Winnipeg to Calgary, drop two skids, and then move up to Edmonton. That was actually more expensive. Even though, because there's a drop fee which is added, and somehow this just wasn't as efficient. So we work out to a cost here of 32 cents per unit for the freight for both of these locations. So now if we come back to our wholesale retail pricing model, so what we've done here is, so we can say that we're going to sell it at $4.29 because we looked at the market and it's 77% higher than Winnipeg. So that works out to $4.29. Retailer still wants to make their 30%. We're not dealing with the wholesale at this point. We're just dealing with getting the goods to those markets. And the outbound freight for this, we've got our 32 cents here, which is 10.5% of our selling price. So that's going to be the selling price of $72, assuming we're selling it directly to the retailer ourselves. And really everything else is the same. The inside money's amount has gone up because I've increased this. Now, typically, given that freight is so extremely variable, it's not necessarily practical to try to apply it to every single unit of product. So, typically operationally, you would probably charge it out as, either a cost of sales or into operating expenses. I'm doing it here just to illustrate that we can include it as part of our cost if we were using this model. And just in terms of how that works out, how it is feasible if we're using this model to get the goods out to another market. And yes, we have inflated the retail, but I think that's reasonable given that it is a more expensive market to sell into. Now we're going to be paying long haul to Alberta, so we do have a freight cost. We're probably still not using those inside monies, so that's still a marketing cost, albeit lower now. And we're probably now going to be paying commission because we're going to need someone out there to work that market for us, and we're going to need to compensate them. So now in terms of your total gross profit, we're at $72 the selling price, minus the $24 cost of goods, minus the $7.56 for the freight, minus $3.60 for the commission. We're at $36.84 gross profit per case. And of course, that's going to be lower by the $7.56 and the $3.60 because now we're incurring those costs. Okay, so that gets the goods to the Alberta market. We'll talk in a second about the next step of getting them, then getting those goods into the stores. But first of all, let's say we were going to hire a local distributor. So an independent wholesale distributor who might then be able to take care of getting our goods out to the stores for us. So it's going to be a similar scenario, except that we're going to add in an upcharge. So they're going to need to make some money. So everything else is the same. The retail is the same. The amount the retailer wants to earn, 30%. We've now got the wholesale upcharge. We've still got the freight, 32 cents to get those goods to the Alberta markets. And there we go. It's still feasible because the thing is we've got we've built it in so that we're preparing ourselves right from the outset to have this cost to the wholesaler. So if we're not paying it to the wholesaler, well, we can pay it to ourselves and or keep it for ourselves. And then of course we can use it to figure out how to get the goods to the retails ourselves, or we find someone to do it for us at a reasonable cost. Now in this case, since we are now paying someone to get the goods out, our gross profit does go down. So down to $23.20 a case. So about shy of 50%. No, it's less than that. Okay, so then we'll introduce the concept of third-party logistics, or 3PL. We talked about this last time in terms of what they offer. And really what it is, it's a warehousing service, it's a fulfillment service. So you can have your goods shipped to them, they will store it for you, and really takes the operational burden away from you. So you would receive your orders, you would send them the information about the orders, they would pick them, and they would do essentially a DSD, direct store delivery, for you. Now, this is distribution only, so you still are going to have some mechanism in order to get the orders. So whether that's you calling the stores or visiting the stores, or you have some agent working the market on your behalf to do that work, and to ensure that the stores are always full with goods. In terms of costs for 3PL, they pretty well charge at every opportunity. It's fine. They're business. They have to. So they've got storage fees. So you might store by or pay that by the pallet. And there's all sorts of ranges. So it's really hard to say where this would land. But it's this kind of thing where maybe you talk to a couple of them and see what their rates are. With any logistics provider, whether it's a truck or a warehouse or a distributor, I think consistency is key insofar as if you can assure them that you're going to have some consistent level of business that they can kind of rely on, and they can schedule things, that'll help you with your rates. It'll help you get better rates. So there's storage fees by the pallet, or partial pallet. They might be based on square footage in terms of the footprint that you're taking. There'll be handling fees. So just on receiving, there'll be handling for picking an order. It might be by line of the order. It might be by the case. It might be by both. There's in and out for the pallets of receiving or distributing your goods. There's order processing fees. It could be special labeling. They would charge you for that. Returns, they would charge you for that as well. So based on that, I cobbled together a bit of an example here for you. So I took the low and the high, created an average for case picking, order processing, delivery, and fuel surcharge. And example was 5 cases. So let's say we're going to ship 5 cases of 2 different SKUs to one of our stores in Edmonton. So the total cost on average would be $110 for 5 cases, works out to $22 a case. And if you'll recall, when we hired a independent wholesale distributor, in that example, it was around $14 a case using them. So in this example, 3PL isn't necessarily the best thing. Now, maybe if we were to talk to them and say, well, we're going to consistently be distributing 5 orders a day times 5 days a week, perhaps that would help get it down. So it's always a condition of when you're dealing with people, is don't necessarily with your vendors, don't always just take whatever they quote you as the given price. There's always room to negotiate. And I'm sure there are vendors out there who actually give you a higher price so that you can negotiate because they expect it. It's typically done. And so therefore they can give you that win by saying, oh, let me talk to my boss or whatever. And, wait for a few moments and then come back and say, yeah, I can help you. I can give you, 13% off or whatever. How's that kind of a thing? So it always pays to haggle. When I was a buyer, I always used to say, they tell me what the price is, and I would just say, well, what's my price? And then they go and look, and then I get a better price just for asking that question. And it did work. So that brings us to, it saves to be deliberate. I think the expression is it pays to be deliberate, but it actually pays and saves. So what I would recommend with respect to penetrating a new market is you may have situations where some retailer may call you up and say, hey, I heard about your product. It's awesome. You got to get me some stock right away. Those aren't very profitable ventures. It's lovely to hear from someone that they love your product and consumers are asking for it, but it's not necessarily profitable, and it's not a plan. You want to formulate a schedule. So you want to work with the retailer group that you're working with. You want to set up some sort of a plan so you can schedule it. And what you want to do is schedule the initial stock deployment with in-store product demonstrations, in-store send-off promotions. And whenever you're doing those activities, that always gives you license to ask for off-shelf displays or end displays. And those are absolutely critical to building your business. They give you more profile, they give you more visibility in the store. And really, it doesn't matter where they are. Obviously, some locations are better than others, but the key is to get out of your section in center store if that's where you are, because not every single customer who walks into the store is going to be walking up and down the aisles. And when you consider the thousands of items down each aisle, the chances of them noticing your product, even if they need it, may still be difficult. So what's also a plus too at this stage of your development is that if you're selling direct store delivery versus having your stock dropped into a corporate warehouse, that's probably not an option at this point. And it's actually a good thing, because then they'll try and get you for listing fees. They'll get you for the inside monies for sure, right from the hop. So operating DSD gives you an opportunity to kind of fly under the radar. It gives you more flexibility too, because if you're selling to them corporately, you would have to schedule your promos months in advance, maybe up to 6 months in advance. You're going to be paying money for it, and you're going to have to deploy every single promo at the exact time. Now, that's a lot of the stores are going to be doing that work, but it really helps a promo if you're calling on the stores before the promo, weeks ahead of the promo, and booking extra stock for them, booking those extra displays, so that you've got really good, strong support for the promo, and you're going to get a much bigger lift in your sales, a much bigger ROI in your investment. So that works really well. So with that, just in terms of being deliberate, I put together just an example of a stock depletion plan here. So let's say that we dropped 96 cases. We got 2 SKUs, so 2 flavors. We dropped 96 cases of each flavor. Yes, you can do a mixed pallet, but I just said, well, let's do 2 just to increase the volume of the load. And just to get the stock deployed to each store. And there's 20 Safeway stores. We're just talking Safeway here. 20 Safeway stores in Calgary, 16 in Edmonton. So we deploy 1 case to each store, and it may get put on the shelf by the store staff, which is great. It may have a sign on it, maybe right where we want it, or it may not. Your case may be sitting in the back and people don't know what to do with it. They haven't been told, or they haven't gotten around to it. So that's where there's value in you or your agent visiting the stores, finding that case, or maybe you're delivering it there personally, and getting it out on the sales floor. It's not going to sell in the back. So let's say out of a 20 case of 24, you're going to sell a quarter of a case per store per week. So times 20 stores, that adds up to 5 cases a week. So over 4 weeks, that should be about 20 cases in Calgary, 16 cases in Edmonton for a month. Let's say for a demo, we're only going to do 5 stores a week. We don't have endless people to do demos, and there's only certain days you want to do those demos. So let's say we can only do 5 per week. We're going to do both SKUs at the same time. So we're going to need, and this is really light, like I would hope we could sell more than 5 or 24 units on a demo in a store, but just being conservative, we say that's a total of 5 cases. So we do another 5 the week after, another 5 cases. We do another, etc. So after the first month, with these numbers, which I think are kind of light, we've deployed 65 of our 96 cases of stock from our inventory in the Calgary warehouse. Edmonton, a little bit lower because they've only got 16 Safeways. So we've deployed 52. We've got 44 cases left. Now, after every time you do a promo, whether it's a cents off, especially a deeper discount, you're going to have a nice lift. I've seen about a 3 times lift on the event. That could be with a demo and cents off. And then, of course, your regular threshold of sales after that is going to rise as well. So let's say we went from selling a quarter of a case per store per week to, let's say, a half a case. So now we went from moving 5 cases a week for all 20 stores in Calgary to 10 cases a week for all the stores in Calgary. So now after the second month, we've now moved another 40, and whoops, we've got a shortfall here of 9 cases. Edmonton's a little lower, same assumptions, but we've got 12 cases we're down to. So just trying to make the point that if you have a plan and it's coordinated with your store activity, you can actually move that, and you can have not have the stock sitting there costing you money. So with that and some of the costs we looked at previously, I think we could maybe look at the idea of doing your own DSD, direct store delivery distribution. So when you think about one place costing a wholesale distributor $14 per case, you're not really getting $14 of value. For 10 cases in one location, that's $140 for someone to haul the goods there. You're really only getting partial value for that, which would be the delivery from point A to point B. And when you consider your sales commission on DSD is $360 per case, if you had someone who's a sales / delivery person, because that'd probably be enough work for one person to keep busy, either in one market each, one person in Edmonton, one person in Calgary, or combined, start off with 2. Even if you double that to $7.20 per case commission, that could very well motivate an individual and provide you with some decent cost to access the market. So it brings us to some thoughts about a promotion plan, your promotion plan. So my recommendation is you introduce this right from the start. So when you're presenting your product to a store, so the process is probably going to be like this, where you're going to talk to your head office contacts. So Sobeys, let's say, you're going to talk to Gary Hughes at Sobeys in Calgary, and he's going to be excited about listing your product, and you're going to share your plan with them, and he'll announce it to all the stores. But you still want to go out to every store, and when you're talking to the store, you want to show your sell sheet, talk about the product and all the benefits to the retailer, and then you're going to have a promotion plan, because you want to make it abundantly clear to them that you understand it is your responsibility to get your product selling in their store. And I think the more vendors, sellers like yourself, who understand that, will be really successful. Because if you think that you're going to put it on the store shelves, then you can, put up your feet and just wait for the money to roll in, you would be mistaken. There is a lot of work involved in getting the product moving. So your plan you're going to outline to them is going to be the in-store demonstrations. You're going to have some cents off savings. You're going to have deep discounts, let's say every 5-6 weeks, kind of mix it up a bit. And maybe you'll throw in some intermittent MTRs, and manufacturer temporary reductions. They go by different names. Usually it's a 5% discount, but what it accomplishes is it gets that nice little yellow tag up on your section. So it might be just in center store on the aisles, or maybe you can get a little display, and it's that yellow flag that gets customers coming over to your section, taking a look, and like, oh, what is this? So I mentioned having a price $3.99 or $4.29, and there is room in there. You can see in the calculation in our retail wholesale calculation sheet, there's all sorts of room built in there, and that's deliberate, because you don't necessarily have to erode your core gross margin. You can take it out of other places. or you can reduce your margin either way. But the idea is I found it's more effective to have a slightly higher regular retail price and then to do discounts that will drive incremental tonnage. And it's called a high-low strategy. I think it works great. You may hear from someone like a Real Canadian Superstore where they say, no, just give us our best price. We'll take care of doing the featuring. Well, they're still intending to do featuring. So even if their EDL, the everyday low price, is lower than the competition, they still recognize the fact that that's not enough. Even Walmart does it. Yeah, they're known for low prices, but they still find that they still have to give consumers a push once in a while with a bit of a discount on something to keep that category alive. Also, too, is whenever you're doing any sort of promos, demos especially, it always gives you license to ask for off-shelf displays and end displays. And yes, I'm a broken record on that, but it is very important. One thing that's cool too is that on a promo, a retailer is typically willing to take a lower gross profit margin. So when I mentioned a lot of them would take 35, I've seen retailers go as low as 25%. So take 10 off the 35. Off of 30, they probably just take the 5. So if both you and your retailer were to give some 5 points off, you get quite a deep discount for the consumer. So just as an example, if we knocked our gross margin down from 45 to 40, the retailer from 30 to 25, the effect is that then the retail can go down to 367. And that was, where are we here? We've got the freight in here. So we've got the outbound freight. So this is in the Alberta market. So that's going from 429 down to 367. So just as an illustration for you. Now, one thing that's critical in terms of setting up promos is you got to leave yourself and the retailer time to coordinate and to get everything in order for the promo. So there's got to be a gap from when they can order the goods to when you make the goods, they receive the goods, they merchandise the goods. There's a lot of steps there that need to be done. So it's not like you can turn on a dime or expect a retailer to turn on a dime. For their regular scheduled features, I mentioned, I believe they're up to about a 6-month lead time. Fortunately, with us on the DSD, they are allowing us to have a shorter turnaround time. I would still probably try to give them, ideally, I'd say 3 to 4 weeks. Even with that, you may find that some of the off-shelf space or some of the end display space has already been booked. So that's where being further in advance would be helpful. But I think that especially if for a new product introduction, if you were doing demos, they would figure something out. Also, too, it's critical that you insist that there be the demo station is in proximity to where the product is. So if the product's in center store, that means the demo station can't be down the aisle. It needs to be in one of the action alleys, and you've got to have a display right there. Otherwise, your demo is a waste of time. I've seen it too many times where even as a consumer, I try something, I like it, I want to buy it. Then I ask them, well, where is it? And they say, well, it's down this aisle down here. And I say, forget it. I'm too lazy to do that. So if it was right here, fine, I would have grabbed some, but no, I'm not going hunting for it. So in terms of scheduling our features is you want to have some gaps in there from when the retailer buys it to merchandising it. And I have a template that we will be sharing with you, and ultimately it generates a chart something like this, where you've got a purchasing week, so week beginning, dates don't matter here. So this is the wholesale side of the chart. So the regular cost per case is this. You choose whatever you want to give them as a discount per case. Here's the net cost. And then the selling week. You notice there's a month gap. So the week beginning November 7 is when they can order the goods. And then the week beginning December 5th is when they would be selling the goods to consumers. So between that time is when you would be producing the goods, shipping the goods, and then it gives the retailer time to set up the promo and have it ready so that when the price takes effect, then it's out there and ready to go. Okay. Alrighty. Then one last thing, excuse me, one last thing to mention here. In the course of researching this, I was looking at all sorts of scenarios, and I was looking at even shipping Winnipeg to Vancouver, certain number of pallets by rail, and then transloading it to truck, and then shipping it from there. Um, and it is interesting because it actually is cheaper to ship more goods further west and then to ship partial truckloads east to Calgary and Edmonton. And again, like I said, it's one of those scenarios where you can come up with the hypotheses. You can use an AI interface to kind of test them to get a rough idea, and then perhaps you can take those hypotheses to a channel partner, such as a freight forwarder or someone, trucking company that you want to work with, and discuss those ideas with them, and just kind of see what you can brainstorm in terms of an effective approach to come up with a plan to move, like I say, a bulk amount of goods as far as possible, and then get them deployed from there. And one of the ways to do that is with a full truckload. So you can put up to 26 skids or 45,000 pounds in a full truck. But the thing is that even if you're only putting, I did an example with 15,000 pounds and a second one with 20,000 pounds, barely half full, there was still quite a savings over using LTL. So got the same scenario here where this is two pallets for each location. So we're going to ship 6 pallets from Winnipeg all the way out to Vancouver. We're going to drop 2 pallets there at a warehouse to serve that market. We're going to then carry on to Calgary, same truck, goods still on the same trailer. We're going to drop 2 pallets there. And then we're going to carry on 300 kilometers, Calgary to Edmonton, and drop the final 2 pallets there. So with LTL, you can see that the cost per case is $10.16 for the 2 Alberta cities, $12.50 for Vancouver. Cost per unit, 42 cents for Alberta, 52 cents for Vancouver. Full truckload, cost per case is quite a bit lower, and down to 30 cents, 26 cents, and 35 cents, respectively, for Calgary, Edmonton, Vancouver. So, there are some savings there. I upped it slightly to a total of 8 pallets, this time totaling 20,000 pounds. And these numbers here, it can change, different situations, whatever. This is an example. I'm noting ambient here, so it's dry goods on a regular trailer. If you wanted to use refrigerated or frozen service, protected service, it's an extra 30 to 35%, pretty much across the board for LTL or FTL, full truckload. Same scenario, except this time we're going to drop 2 pallets in Vancouver, and then carry on, drop 3 in Calgary, and then 3 in Edmonton. And LTL for this scenario, and it is more cost effective to actually go Winnipeg to Vancouver, separate trailer, Winnipeg to Calgary, separate trailer, Winnipeg to Edmonton. So that's what these rates are based on. So they are different from the previous situation. Full truckload, we're using one trailer, and we're going to all 3 locations. So it knocks down our cost per unit a bit more, to 25 cents, 22 cents for Edmonton, and it went up slightly for Vancouver to 39 cents. So that's the thing, like I mentioned, it's ultimately math in terms of, figuring out different scenarios. And yes, there are quite a few costs associated with each of these scenarios. And as I mentioned, it would be very difficult, if not impossible, to try and constantly tie that to your cost of goods in our spreadsheet there. Like I said, that was mainly for illustrative purposes. Uh, Operationally, it's going to be more effective just to charge that out as cost of sales or operation costs. Now, we've already done a few workshops about supply chain, and they're all being recorded, and they're going to be available on the Manitoba Agriculture website in terms of our YouTube channel. So if you're interested in seeing more of those, please either pop us a note. I'll show you any address in a second, or make a note on the assessment sheet that you're going to get, that you're interested in receiving information about supply chains. And we're not done yet. We're going to keep doing more resources and more webinars, and doing all we can to help you to consider the opportunity of selling interprovincially. So please keep in touch. We'll have more for you. And here's an address here, mbagrifood@gov.mb.ca, if you want to pop us a note, and we'll get back to you. So that's all I've got for now for you.
Thanks, Jeff. That was
Thank
great.
you.
So a couple of questions here, and please, for anyone else that has any questions, please enter them in the Q&A in the bottom panel. So first question, what gross margin should a company aim for to be long-term sustainable?
Okay. I found that the 45% on your and that's a question where you can say, well, it depends who you're selling to. If you're selling direct to consumer, then I say you want to have the 1-to-4 ratio. So you want to have a 75% gross margin if you're selling direct to consumer. If you're selling through other channel partners, then I would say 45%. And the reason I say that is based on research and also just based on working the numbers. So in Canada, on average, food processing sector makes about 41% margin. And my guess is that they all started at 41 as their target, but through discounting, et cetera, that gets knocked down a little bit to 41%. But you look at their P&Ls, and just in terms of where gross profit works out after your some other charges, and then your contribution margin, that's a good number to go for. That makes
Perfect.
sense.
Yeah, it does. Thanks, Jeff. What should you consider when determining your case size when trying to secure or engage potential buyers?
Good question. You want to go to the stores, look at the section you plan to be in or think you belong in, get a sense, and don't just go to one retailer, go to a couple of retailers, and just see how big is the space. Like, how deep is that shelf? Is it a 24-inch? Is it an 18-inch? So actually take your tape measure, take some measurements, and then use that to help inform, well, how much can this shelf hold? Because retailers more and more don't want back stock. It's a real pain in the bum to have to, fill a section and then have some left over and take it in the back. So, and you don't necessarily, if it fits, 26 units on one facing, then maybe, you don't need 26, and maybe 24 is fine or something like that. Early on, you're probably just going to be getting one facing per SKU. So a facing is one unique position for your product. And if you go to the store and you see something really popular like Coca-Cola, they've probably got 4 feet of it. So they've got like 20 facings of Coca-Cola. So there's like a real big presence. We're probably not there yet. We're at the point where we get one can and of one flavor, one can of the next flavor. SKU is stock keeping unit. And like I say, it's based on how much space there is. It's based on, I guess, normal expectations. Typically, like 2 dozen or 24s, 18 is kind of what's expected. But at the same time, you also want to do what is going to properly fit in a box. Um, Often you might be able to save some money if you can find a stock box. Like there are tons of different sizes of boxes. You can look at someone like uline.ca, just to give you an example of the different sizes. Another thing too is two things. One, if you're, let's say you're buying glass jars, please do not take the carton that the glass jars arrive in and think you can fill each jar with 400 milliliters of product and pack them back in that same box. It's going to be a disaster. You're going to destroy all your product because that carton is not built for all that weight. You want to work with a packaging company, Midwest Packaging in Winnipeg, let's say, and or we got all sorts of packaging. One just popped in my head. But you want to work with a company who's going to take your weight and going to figure out how much loading capacity. Because think about when I was talking about building a skid. Well, that skid was about 4 feet tall. There's still another roughly 4 feet of headspace in that trailer that a freight company may want to load up other goods on top of your pallets. So you got to have a case that is built properly for your product, and it's got to have the right weight loading for that product alone, and also even thinking about stacking other stuff on top of it. Extremely long answer to your simple question. It's just what I
No,
do.
it was great, Jeff. What about cost? Is it
For
should they for the case, like to keep it a low cost to make it easier to try? And then the other question was around could you have cases that have multiple SKUs in them to encourage people to try?
right. In terms of costs, yeah, like case costs can get really, really expensive. What you'll find, I know from Uline, is if you just look at the basic cases, they're overkill because I think they're built for like 200 pounds of force per inch or whatever. So they do have a line that's about 30% cheaper that has lower weighting requirements. So yeah, I think that'd be the thing is talk to a packaging company, and you can weigh the options of like maybe they have something, they'll have dies. That's the thing with cases is I'm pretty sure they're still using dies in terms of creating a size for you, and those can be expensive. And you want to be careful too is that a case manufacturer may want to sell you a die that's $2,000, but it's more efficient for them because it uses their big machine. Well, they're not thinking about you, they're thinking about their own needs in terms of that die. But if you went to a different place or you said, no, I'm not paying for that, okay, well, use a smaller machine, it's less efficient for us, maybe a slightly higher cost per unit, but the die is only $1,000, let's say. So you can't necessarily always trust what's just given to you. You want to ask questions in terms of like, why does the die have to be this much? Is there not another option? Um, and as much as possible, like it's great to have the product perfectly fit the case, but maybe if there's an option where there's a little, something that's really, really close, that's going to save you some money. It's going to be cheaper. Even if in the short term, if you had a little bit of space, maybe you put some filler in there, whether it's an air pack or some sort of packing material. That might be a cheaper option in the short term than getting a custom case made. In terms of mixed cases, no, don't do that. It's a problem because no one can guarantee that the two flavors or the two options in that case are going to sell at the same ratio in every single location. You may have one store that sells four of flavor A for every one of flavor B. So how does that work? You're better off if you wanted to have a lower commitment option for retailers. I would just go with a smaller case pack. So let's say do a 12 pack and just one flavor per case. And then that way there's less physical and less financial commitment too. Which leads me to one other thing I'll just offer is that I've done the sales thing, and I've heard every excuse under the sun or every reason under the sun, every pushback possible. A lot of times it doesn't mean no, I'm not going to buy from you. It just means I'm not convinced yet. So they may say your product is too expensive, My customers aren't going to want this, whatever. Your retort to that is always going to be, it's a formula. You agree with them. I absolutely agree with you. You're right. This is why I'm doing it this way. Um, and in terms of the price being too high, well, we've actually done really well with it every week at the farmers market in Winnipeg. We're selling 80 units a day at $8 a pop. Customers, seem to see the value in that. And then the next part of the formula is you have a guarantee. You say, I'm going to do everything I can to get this product selling in your store because I know that's my job. That's I appreciate the space. I'm not going to waste that opportunity, and therefore I think it's going to sell. But if for some reason your customers, you're right, and customers just don't get it, they just don't go for it. This isn't the right store for it. I will take back everything for a full refund. Not happily, of course, but I will do that. Kind of a thing. You have that guarantee. It's basically called guaranteed sale. You just cut to the chase and say, I will offer this guaranteed sale, but at least give me the next 12 weeks to prove to you that this product is right for your store and it's going to be a great performer for you in this section.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Jeff, for such a great presentation and providing us with an excellent overview of the incremental costs associated with expanding your sales and how to set your product pricing to maintain profitability and promote and drive sales outside of Manitoba and across Canada.